Hey everybody, we're back to Saline County Hardliners tonight, and I'm Keith Kellum, and with co-host Kevin Bradshaw, we got Jimmie Cavin back with us tonight. We're gonna we're gonna talk about a little bit about Act 649, which is Public School Access and Transparency Act. Um, it's an act to create the Public School Access and Transparency Act to require public access to learning materials and for other purposes. So Jimmie, I believe he just wrote a article about this the other day on in Arkansas First News, and so we'll let Jimmie kind of go over with everybody. Might have missed that article and is watching the show, and we can kind of touch on what it means and where it's going and how it's going to affect us, which is a good thing, I believe. And so, Jimmie, how's it going tonight?
I'm good, Keith. Keith, and I appreciate you and Kevin having me on. I always love coming on the show. It's so much fun.
Yeah,
And
we appreciate you coming on.
The act it's really a good law. Surprisingly, it's brought by two Republicans. But of course, being Republican in the state legislature does not equate to being a conservative.
We learned that.
Yes, in Mindy McClendon, State Representative Mindy McClendon, and State Senator Jim Dotson, both fail as conservatives. Okay, and they both graded out on conservatism this session at below 50%. But that doesn't negate that they brought a good bill and got it signed into law in Act 649. And it's one of those things I always tell people: do you wonder what's being taught in the classroom at public schools? Okay, and in years past, parents would have problems finding out exactly what's going on in the classroom materials. The public certainly would. I've always contended that information has always been public record under the Arkansas Freedom of Information Act, but superintendents, school districts, the Arkansas School Board Association have always seen it differently. Never was really a court case on it. So what this law did was put clarity in there. And basically what it says is that any material used in the classroom falls under the Arkansas Freedom of Information Act and is public record. And I'll read you it talks about learning materials, but here's their definition for learning materials. It means curriculum, syllabus, lesson plans, instructional materials, assignments, presentations, books, articles, video recordings, audio recordings, digital resources, or other resources that are maintained and used by public schools for classroom instruction, regardless of format or medium. Okay, and that is so important because now what you can't do is like testers' test scores are not public records, which shouldn't be. Those are what's under the Federal Privacy Act. Those are called student educational records. So you can't
now a parent can see their own kids, but not public. It's not public knowledge.
Sure. And in the article, I wrote an example, Keith, that you and I talked about a few years back. It came to my attention, matter of fact, several years back, that a teacher at North Little Rock Middle School, an 8th grade teacher who teaches science, okay, was playing in his class anti-police videos and intersectionality and critical race theory type videos. And that he was actually using that as his curriculum in the class and saying things to students like, you know, if you're pro-police, then you're going to fail my class and things like that. And so, and keep in mind, this was a science class. And so when I found out about it, I couldn't get the materials
Not
because
civics and social studies, but science.
no, that's right, science, 8th grade science class. And so I dug in, investigated, I brought it out, I exposed it. The problem was solved, as far as it happening again, but the teacher was never held accountable, which I have an issue with. But this law kind of clarifies now that, hey, if you request a material that has been done in that classroom, you can get that material. If there's a video, if your kid came home and said, hey, they played this video in class, then the parent can do a freedom of information request, and they have to give you that video at no charge. They have to provide you that video at no charge. But I'll do you one better, Keith. Say I've got a neighbor, and my neighbor's telling me, boy, they're presenting this material in my son's class. Mm-hmm. And they're doing a study guide on this in an article that is clearly an article that doesn't apply to the curriculum in that class. Such as there again, if you're in a science class and the teacher is presenting articles and quizzing you on articles on police beatings, then that's not part of that curriculum. So say that parent told me about it. Mm-hmm. Well, then I, as a citizen, I can go and say, hey, I want these materials from this class. And they can say, well, you don't have a child in that class. Doesn't matter. I'm a citizen of the state of Arkansas. I have a right to see that information. And so then I can obtain that information. Now, one thing that people are kind of under a misconception of, and I saw a lot of liberals started commenting on my article and when it went on social media. And a lot of liberals are not for this. They don't want you to see what's actually being taught to those kids.
Because they're into indoctrination. They're strictly
right.
Indoctrination.
And that's exactly right. And so a lot of them were commenting on there, this doesn't happen in class. They're not indoctrinating in class. And that's not true. We've seen so many evidence. Well, I mean, we've got a lot of really good teachers in the state of Arkansas. Don't get me wrong.
Sure.
We've got some great teachers, okay? But we have to recognize, just like in any profession, we have bad teachers. We have wonderful police officers in this state, but we also have bad, corrupt police officers.
That's any occupation.
That's right. And so we have to recognize that. And so to get those materials now, it's simply a matter of filing the freedom of information request. By law, they have to give you those materials. But a lot of misconception because the liberals that were commenting on my post, which is great. I want everybody to engage. Mm-hmm. I'm glad liberals read me. Okay. Yeah. And so
they may learn something.
Yeah. And so I welcome, you guys know me, I welcome everybody's comments, right? But they were putting a lot of misinformation out that said, well, the teachers aren't doing indoctrination because the curriculum is mandated by the state of Arkansas. The state of Arkansas determines the curriculum.
I'm going to ask you about that in a minute, but keep going.
Sure, but that's not true. What the state does, the Department of Education develops standards of education, okay? And so they set these standards for, math, English, history, science, right? Okay. Then it's up to the school board.
The school board.
Right. The school board determines the curriculum used in the school, not the state. The state's function is to set the standards, and then they want to see state testing to everything.
Well, like the state will just say, okay, to graduate from high school, secondary school in the state of Arkansas, they're all pretty much the same. You got to have 4 years of English, 2 years of science, blah, 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 4 years of math or whatever. So that's what they decide is what it takes to graduate and get a diploma.
And they
decides how to get to that point, right?
Right. And when they set those standards of what you have to accomplish to graduate and what you have to accomplish to move on, that's why I have standards. Look, these are the standards of learning in each one of these subjects. Okay. And then it's up to the school board to decide how best to meet
Yeah,
those
if you
standards.
want to have calculus or not, or whether you want to have trig or not, and all that.
Right. Or what the school, well, the school boards determine what textbooks to use.
Right.
And the school boards determine the curriculum in those to be applied. And so what they do is there's school districts, there's Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. Okay. You have elementary education, then secondary education.
Right.
In which generally secondary education is 7 through 12. And so you, at each school district, you have someone who's over the curriculum for elementary schools and someone who's over the curriculum for high schools or secondary school education. And those are generally administrative levels. And so they put together plans and they go before the school board. And then the school board votes for those plans. And those plans include, what is our curriculum going to be? What textbooks are we going to use? What material are we going to use? And how do we apply that curriculum? And the school board votes on that. So they decide that. So then that filters from them, from the administration, down to the different elementary schools and junior highs and high schools. Then it's up to the principal to carry that mission from there. And then it goes to the classroom. Well, you guys know this from being in the military. Okay. You can have rules and regulations on a level. Okay. The Army and the Navy have a set of rules that come down from the top. But by the time you get to individual bases, down to individual commanders over individual divisions or units, right? Mm-hmm. Things can change, and so
they look at it differently, and as long as it's it's open, they'll leave it open to where they can make their own decision on maybe how to make those physical standards.
One
delegation
sergeant,
of authority.
Yeah. So one sergeant has a way of running his unit, right? And then another sergeant may have a different way of running it. Mm-hmm. So imagine teachers. Teachers are not the same. So it's not a deal where they go in, every teacher teaches the same thing in their class. Okay. And so the teachers are the same way as those sergeants in different ways they apply. So if I have a 6th grade English teacher in this classroom, and then down the hall, there's another 6th grade English teacher, and so that teacher's got her classes, this teacher's got her classes. The way they teach inside that class is completely different and how they approach it. And so if I've got one teacher in one English class that says, look, I'm going to stick strictly by the curriculum that the school board wants us to do, we're not going to deviate from it. All we're going to teach in this class is that curriculum, and we're not going to get off on any other subjects. Okay, you go, great. But you go down the hall, the other 6th grade English teacher goes, you know what? I'm a liberal and I don't like Donald Trump and those policies. So for part of my class, I'm going to teach this curriculum that the school board handed down. Then for part of my class, I'm going to read my students articles, liberal articles about how bad President Trump is. Or we could take it from another perspective. Maybe that teacher down the hall is a strong conservative and really likes Trump. And so they could go, okay, I'm gonna push my political beliefs about Donald Trump and conservatism on these 6th grade students during my English class. Well, either one of those scenarios are wrong, right?
When we were in school, it was a little different you've raised your boys in public school just like I raised my kids in public school, I'm sure. And it was different from when we went to school than when they went to school, of course. And it's even different more now than it was when you got grown kids, I got grown kids, like Kevin's age or whatever. It's changed from that now. But I remember, you remember the days when and I guess it still is off limit. Religion was off limits in public school, in a public school, private school, Catholic higher, where Kevin has his, it's fine. But in public school, it was because I guess they figured, if you teach one, you got to teach all of them, right? But a lot of back then they liked to. Some of them would pull the Bible out of the store. I don't know if you ever had a teacher do that, but they weren't supposed to do that.
Well, they still did
No,
it
they
when I was in
weren't.
Bryant.
Well, I'm saying though, I don't know. I don't know what the law is, and I just know that when I was a kid, it was a no-no, or they went through a time period in the probably in the late '60s, early '70s, where it was kind of a no-no. You remember that, Jimmy?
Yeah, and here's the thing, okay? I'm a conservative. You both are conservatives. I'm a Christian. I'm just not a very good Christian, but I'm a Christian. And you guys are Christian, okay? But here's the way I feel about it, in the way it should be. I instill values into my children.
Mm-hmm.
You guys instill values into your children. What I'm looking for the school to do is teach math, science, how to read, how to comprehend. I don't need the school pushing a religion on my child, no matter what that religion is.
I
don't
agree.
need.
I'm not in a public school. If you want that, you send them to a whatever religion school you want to go to.
Sure. And so the role, I think all three of us agree. Look, the role, and if we got back to that role instead of doing all this other stuff, then the kids might actually know how to read. Reading and comprehension scores across our state are just.
You got where they lower the standards. Okay, instead of raising the standards to bring I don't know how to phrase it, the lesser or the ones that aren't doing as well up, they bring the ones that can do it down to the level. So, they try to make them all equal.
And they hold them all back.
And nobody's ever going to be equal. We all have different people are more intelligent. There's people that are just plain more intelligent than other people. I'm not one of those guys, but there's some people that have high IQs are very intelligent. Just DNA.
I'm going to contend in the worst thing that ever happened to education in this country was when Jimmy Carter was president and he started the federal Department of Education.
Yes.
And then they got involved in local education. That's when our scores started going downhill, because the problem we have now is too much indoctrination and not enough education, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I'm not a Governor Sanders fan by any stretch of the means, but the part of the LEARNS Act that I do like is that it's designed to get the focus on education,
mm-hmm.
and not on indoctrination with social issues, right? And so, and it's going to be a few years before we see if this plan even works. But the idea is to get the reading up, which if you don't have by third grade, if you don't have that basic foundation on reading comprehension skills, then you're never going to get caught up. Okay? You're not going to catch up.
I'll tell you something else. This is my own personal opinion, and I may get hammered for this one, but our public education system has been slowly deteriorating since me and you were in school. In other words, I would say
since Jimmie Carter, right?
1970 or 71. It's when all your busing stuff started. They were more concerned about who's going to school with who than they are about education. And then everything, and that's when they stopped. They didn't want to paddle anymore. They didn't want to do this anymore. But I do blame parents a lot for all this happening by complaining about things that shouldn't have been complained about. So it made, there was a time I remember where by the time I was in high school, which was in the 70s, they still whipped kids, like corporal punishment, but it was far between, and they started getting scared to do it because of parents' reactions. Okay. And I don't mean beat them to death, which I remember, and you probably do too. I had some teachers, to be honest, in school that were put it on you pretty good, you know. I know you did too, probably. You know, in elementary school, they'd shake you around, and a lot of it was not right, but you know what? It worked. It worked.
Well, you lived through it. You know, I'll tell you a quick story on that since we're talking about corporal punishment, okay? You know, I was raised on a farm in Ludlow County, and I went to school at Cavin. And in junior high, I was a really good football player. But I would get in a whole lot of trouble. I mean, a lot of trouble. And I might get kicked out of class and sent to the principal's office. Well, when I'd get to the principal's office, me and the principal would talk football for 30 or 40 minutes till the bell rang. And then he'd say, okay, get back to class. And nothing would happen. And so this is a lesson that really got taught to me on how things are explained. Okay, that's how they explained it to me then. Because I was really good at football.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I would do things that I should really be in big trouble, but I wouldn't get in big trouble for. And my F's would be D's or C's. Okay. And so I got in a lot of trouble, and between trouble and my mom, I got sent to reform school. I started my 10th grade year at reform school. And back then there's a school up in between Russellville and Dardanelle, or between Russellville and Fort Smith on the old highway called Subiaco Academy. It's a Benedictine it's a Benedictine monastery run by monks. And now it's got a boarding school, but now Keith, you know about Subiaco, but now it's a real preppy school, you know, where you got to be really smart to get in. It's college prep school. When I went there, it was just where you got sent.
To straighten your blood out.
Right. And I don't want to make a long story, but so I get up there, and in Cabot at the time, you know, I held the title. I was 15, but I held the title for the whole town. I held the belt. And so I thought I was pretty tough, right? And so I get up to Subiaco, and they drop me off with my footlocker box, and then I'm in a dorm, just like a military barracks. And my first day in class is with Father Leonard, a geometry teacher. And he's a short, fat little priest. And he drew some diagrams on the board in geometry. Guys, I'm 63, and I remember this like yesterday. And he was drawing, he said, now, Mr. Cavin at this, then Mr. Cavin what? And I was sitting in my chair, and I responded with something pretty ugly that I won't say on here. And yeah, I'll never forget it.
He was asking for it.
Oh yeah, I was begging for it. And he just kind of chuckled, looked down, and he walked down the aisle to my desk and looked down over me, and I looked up at him and went, and he smiled, and then he punched me right here in the temple with a fist.
And you had it coming.
And let me tell you, he hit me so hard, the only thing that stopped me and the desk from rolling was the wall when we hit it. Okay.
Hey, those priests didn't jack around back then.
No, and so
What that guy's name? Catholic High Tribe, Father
Tribune.
Boy, he whooped a lot of boys in his time.
Well, I got up and I set my desk back up, and I sat back down my desk, and he was still standing there, and I looked up at him and I said, I'm sorry, Father. And I will never forget this. He just looked at me with a smile. He said, that's quite all right, Mr. Cavin. Now, please answer the question. And I did. And I answered the question. And then me and Father Leonard didn't have any more problems after that.
So we kind of ceased your smart ass, huh?
Well, that's what I learned at early age. It's all in how you explain things. He explained it differently than they did at Cavin. Now, the way he explained it, I got it.
Was that kind of like cool at Luke? You came to an understanding. Huh?
That's right. And so I didn't mean to tell you a long story like that, but yes, talking about corporal punishment. But do you know? To this day, I thank Father for that. I saw him so many times as I grown up as a man. Every time I saw him, I gave him a hug. and thanked him, and because I needed that. So I didn't mean to get up, but I thought you guys might.
But
there's a
that's
corporal punishment story.
well.
Okay.
I think that between parenting and schooling, I mean, that's what's wrong with a lot of kids nowadays. I think is it everyone's afraid to hurt their feelings. They're afraid you're going to hurt their self-esteem, things like that, and without thinking about what's that? Spare the rod.
Spare the rod, spoil the child.
Rod, spoil the child. Right.
Yeah, I mean, there's truth to that stuff, and it don't mean you got to beat them to death or nothing, but you do need. But nowadays,
they need to understand that there's consequences for their actions. That's the thing.
Yeah, you go into classes like, say, you go into Little Rock schools, say, or North Little Rock probably now. You go into school, you go into class, and who's running the show? The kids are running the show.
Oh, I can show you video after video out of North Little Rock and other schools to where students will stand up and tell the teacher "F you" right to their face and dog cuss them.
Yeah, shove them.
Yeah, and I can show you video after video of things that go on.
When I was in school, you shove a teacher. When I was in school, you better be ready because they're going. I had a teacher. He told me, I'll take you outside and I'll beat the hell out of you because ain't no job worth me listening to this.
Well, and there's a thing too. There's a reality which, and teachers, a lot of teachers are under a lot of pressure because they're not allowed.
Oh,
they're told, not to, and they don't even want to do discipline referrals. And
but these kids know this, and it causes them to act out more. It's kind of like your own kid. Your own kid. You say, "Well, I'm going to do this to you. I'm going to do this to you," and you never do it. They're finally going to figure out, old man ain't going to do nothing, so I'm going to do what I want to do. I mean,
that's exactly right. And so, yeah, there's a lot of problems with the disciplinary policies in most schools. In the lack of discipline in those schools. But you said something about parents, and
I do think your wife helps a lot. Yeah.
Well, yeah, but Kevin, your wife works, right?
She does. Yes, she's a nurse.
Okay. All right. So I want to explain to people. We go back to a time. Keith and I go back to a time when it wasn't this way for everybody, but most, probably 80 to 85%, women at that time didn't work. The man worked. You had one person working. And so the difference was you had one parent, mainly the mom, who did keep up with all the education, did keep up with what was going on in school, and worked with their kids at night on homework and got very involved in the school and the parent-teacher association. So they knew what was going on at school, right?
And they would so I think they didn't like it too.
That's right. And so, but as time went on and society changed to where both men and women, by the time you got to the mid 80s, to the late 80s, who could make it on one income?
We had two incomes. We were raising our kids.
Sure, but from a standpoint like when you and I raised kids, now when we were coming up, when we were kids, Keith, generally moms didn't work, and so they were able to stay on top of education. By the time you and I were parenting, both parents had to work, and so it made it so difficult for parents who are trying to, both of them have a job, both of them are trying to work. By the time you get up, get the kids ready for school, get them going, you get to work, get home, you worked all day, both of you worked all day, you get home. Kevin, you know exactly, you're going through it right now. You try to get the kids home, get the homework done, get them bathed, get them fed, get them in bed so you can get them up the next day. There's just not enough time. And so what's happened is it's not so much that parents are not engaged. There are some that are not. I'll ask Kevin this, when the hell do you have time?
Exactly. That's the thing right there. I came home and I was getting them all ready for everything. I picked from the babysitter. I got them fed. Let them run around the yard real quick while I came back in. I kept on going back and forth trying to, deal with them to keep them from, destroying each other, because that's what kids do.
That's what happens when you have a year apart, son.
Yeah. And so that presents a problem for parents, right?
It does.
And so who takes advantage of that problem? You get people in schools that take advantage of that. And here some people get mad and say, well, you're attacking teachers. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. What I'm doing is telling you the reality. When parents are so busy that they don't have time to be thoroughly involved and have the time to really research what their kids are learning in school, then you let the fox in the hen house. And that's what's happened.
And there was times when our parents, or my mother was growing up, and your parents growing up, when they went to school, it was even stricter than when we went to school. But in ways it was stricter. But a lot, my grandparents, my mother's parents, were, God bless them, gone, loved them to death, but they had no education, none, zero education. I mean, my grandmother probably never stepped foot in a school in her life. They worked, and they farmed and all that. They did kids. Exactly the story. But they wouldn't have known when my mom was going to school. They wouldn't have known if you went to Little Rock High and Eastside Junior High and Little Rock, all this. But they would not have known what to look. They didn't know. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
And you've seen that to where now when I knew enough about school and all that. It's not that way so much anymore. It is still somewhat that sometimes, but not like back then.
Well, back in the day, they didn't have these issues with some of the things going on now.
Right, because the teachers, they depended on the teachers to do their job, just on their kids while they're there, and to let them know if they needed to whoop them when they get home or whatever, and then teach them what they needed to learn. My mother taught my grandfather how to read. How about that?
Another thing is parents don't really respect teachers sometimes too, because sometimes they'll just side with a kid.
But kids grew up a lot faster.
My angel would never do that.
Responsibility. They matured faster. Nowadays, they say, well, kids are a lot more mature. No, they're not. I mean, I'm sorry. I'm just going to say, on general, they are not more mature than kids used to be.
I never really got mature, so.
Everybody goes, well, they know more about stuff. Well, when I was going to school, I don't see anything happening now outside of school that didn't happen. Like they talk about bullying. Oh, we got this bullying problem. That's not a new problem. Right, Jimmy? That is not a new problem.
It's always been a problem. It's always been a problem. Yeah. And kind of to your point, these kids, no, they're not more mature now than they used to be. Here's the thing. Maturity is a biological process. Okay. And yeah. And so as you mature, your body matures, your brain matures, right? And things like that. So it's not that kids are more mature now or everything. They just have more access to things than we had. And then, which is another facet of the issue, right? Is everybody's got cell phones, everybody's got computers. Okay. You literally, in this phone, literally contains all information known to man, right? Mm-hmm. And this little thing I'm holding, okay?
A little devil. It's a little devil.
The thing is, they don't actually look at the good stuff. All they look at Skippy toilet.
Well, and why is that? Because they're not mature. And so, which is to the whole point, right? So when the problem we have in schools is so there's so many aspects to it, and then the information network is one of those, the cell phones, the computers. Okay, that's one facet of it. But I contend that it's set up to where education is set up now because the parents are so busy, they don't have the time to be engaged. They don't have the time to really get through with all the information going on and the stuff that teachers can bring into the classroom now. A teacher can bring in something from their cell phone in the class now that can pull up that you have no idea what they're doing and present it to the children. And I go back to the analogy, letting the fox in the hen house. And so that's the reason that education has got away from actually educating and you have too many people going into the teaching profession because they want to go in and indoctrinate kids, and they don't even realize that's what they want, but they want to go in and tell kids their point of view and how things should be instead of teaching how to read and teaching math science. Now, that's not all of them. We, like I say, we have many wonderful teachers, but we do have teachers that do that. This 8th grade science teacher I talked about.
You know, you go somewhere like California or Chicago or somewhere, it's going to be much worse than it is here, or at least outside of, say outside, you get into your schools like Cabot, Bryant, Benton, places like that. Yeah, they're not, I feel like they've dropped off some, but they're not to the point of like Little Rock. You agree with that? I mean, not yet.
Well, to a point, and if you think liberalism doesn't go on at Center Ridge School District, if you think indoctrination doesn't go on at Bay School District.
Oh, I agree. I mean, with a degree is what I meant.
Well, and liberalism has infiltrated education everywhere.
Oh,
and I contend that that the vast majority of public school educators in our state are liberals. Okay.
Well, if you didn't have the regulations that you do have on public schools, state public schools, they would be like your universities are right now. Which your universities, there's no rule. You know, they teach what they want to teach, and of course they're older kids, or older young people or whatever, but they don't have any. You know, they can go off in Never Land, and nobody's going to say anything really.
Well, no, and that's and it's
our public schools, like secondary, would be that way too.
Well, and you just hit on something, because over time the universities have become so liberal, like, you know, University of Arkansas.
Yeah, it's
bastion of liberalism. University of Central Arkansas here in Conway, a very liberal school. I can't think of a school in the state that's not.
Unless you get into your private ones like Harding, Hendrix is private.
Still, Hendrix is probably the most liberal college in the state.
It is.
And Harding is full of liberalism. And so that's kind of my point.
I thought it was a lot more conservative.
Yeah, no, Harding has got a ton of liberalism in it. A ton of liberalism.
Price backing.
And but here's the thing, okay? And that's what ends up in our schools, though, because you have teachers that go to college, okay? And they go to college to become a teacher. And what are they? And so all during that time in college, they're indoctrinated with liberalism.
Exactly.
So what do you think? What do you think they're going to take to the schools they go to work at?
Well,
they're going to take that liberalism indoctrination that they got in college, and they bring it to the public schools.
Well, you know, that's what we're going to do with the libraries. The libraries is the same. It's hand in hand with the education system. The libraries are in this ALA, American Library Association, which is exactly what we're talking about of indoctrination. And so, you know, they're taking all their cue cards from them, and they're all ultra liberal. So it's the same, you know, it's all in the same bag. It's in the same bag, you know?
Well, and let's think about this. Okay. Kevin, if you take math and you put it right here in its pure form, it is neither liberal or conservative, is it?
No, it is not.
Okay. If you take English and you put it over here in your pure form, it is neither liberal or conservative. If you take the basic principles of science, it is neither liberal or conservative. I think the three of us all agree that's all we want taught in school. I don't want conservatism taught in math class. I don't want liberalism taught in math class. I want math.
It's science class. I don't have a problem with them teaching evolution theory, not pushing it. I don't think, you know, like they say that they shouldn't push anything, but it is a theory. But I don't have it with creation. You know, you can go both. That's great. You know, I don't believe in one or the other, but you know, introduce them.
Yeah, I think it's like history, okay? In
Yeah, that's a good one.
history, there's liberalism in history, conservatism in history, there's democracy, there's republic, there's communism, there's racism, anti-Semitism in history. That's all part of history. But if you look at it, if you teach it right, then it's neither liberal or conservative.
It's just
If you teach it right, it's history.
What's bad is you get these like what they call it, 1619 project, where they actually want to. Now that's where they want to actually change history. They want to
say, yeah, they're changing history now.
Compliment somebody else, make it, because we don't want to talk about that because that was a bad time. Well, sure, it was a bad time, but there's been a lot of cultures that have been treated wrongly. They don't talk about the Irish. Irish were totally treated right.
History. The thing about history is you can't change history.
No,
history is what it is.
But you can change the light of the lens of how it's looked at.
Well, you can. What you can do is
like that did it. Communist countries will change their history to what
they try to change their history, but history can't be changed. What you can do is present a false narrative of that history, or basically a history that did not take place, and you can teach that. It doesn't change what really happened, but to your point, and to both of you guys' point, when you look at communism, socialism, and those things, yes, throughout the time they've tried to erase their own history, right?
Well, that's what taking these statues down of Robert E. Lee or Jefferson Davis, whoever, the Confederacy, taking those statues. That's what that's all about. Is, well, let's not it's not, a statue's not necessarily praising somebody. It's just, it's a fact. It happened.
It's a monument to what happened in the past.
Exactly.
It's respecting the history.
And it's respecting people who. Well,
I'll give you an example. Hebrew slaves built all the pyramids in Egypt, right? Slaves built those.
Absolutely.
So should the pyramids be torn down?
Absolutely.
No.
That's a task I don't think anyone's ready to go.
It's kind of a one-sided thing. That's what Bob. That's the bad thing about it. It's a one-sided thing. They want to present it, not change it. You can't, like you said, you can't change it. I said that wrong, but they want to. But if you teach a kid from, say, kindergarten, or whenever they start teaching, already teach history, kindergarten, elementary school up, and the parents don't ever, a lot of parents don't address history to their kids. I did, but because I'm a history buff. But a lot of people don't know nothing about history themselves. But if those kids are learning that stuff, false information, they really think that's true.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and here it goes back to the time. Do the parents have the time to actually see what the kids are being taught to school, and do the parents have the time to challenge it, or to even know? And do the parents have the time to?
They don't bring books home anymore.
No, they don't. They don't, and they have their Chromebooks at school. Their computers at school. The textbooks never leave the school. So that's back to this law. That's why this law is so important.
Yeah,
that's why this law is so important, because if a parent or a citizen such as I, want to know what is going on in a particular classroom, and the school doesn't create a study guide. I'll give you an example. We go back to the school board sets the curriculum. Okay, it's presented to them, they approve it, it's said. Okay, so then you have the people that are over the curriculum, and then you go to the principal, and then they filter it out. So the curriculum goes to the teachers, but the teachers create their study guides. The teachers create their own lesson plans. Okay, that's what you can now see. I can get the lesson plan that teacher created, and you may find that the lesson plan in the sixth grade science teacher's class down this hall and the lesson plan and the other sixth grade teacher science class down the other hall are completely different lesson plans. Right? And so now you have the ability to get that. Now you have the ability to see those lessons plans. Now you have the ability to see if there was an article used in a class. You have the ability to get that. It's public record. Like say if there was a podcast played in a class, okay, you can get that now. And so that gets you back to where then you can say, okay, let me see what's really going on in here. And is my child really being taught the fundamentals of science and the basis of science, or are we getting something that shouldn't even be in there? And then you can go to the school and say, wait a minute, this is not following the curriculum that you guys established. This is way off base. Whereas before you really didn't have the ability to do that. Now you can.
I told my grandkids, like I said, when my kids were in school, it wasn't really that big. I don't know about you. I mean, with your boys, but it wasn't really that big an issue. It was still pretty good. You know, I didn't really worry about it a whole lot. You didn't see a lot of crazy stuff going on as far as education. But when my grandkids started school, I'd tell them when they got a little older, I'd say, like my grandson, I'd say, you know, if you see this in this book, you know, if you see in history class, they're talking about this, and this, would you let me know? Because that's not going to be right. You know.
Well, it still goes back to the time to be involved. I think COVID was
terrible.
You know, it was a plague put on us, but by the same time, a lot of good things resulted from COVID because kids were learning virtually from home,
and parents could literally see on the screen what they were being taught.
And that is what started changing things, right? When parents saw and they went, whoa, wait a minute. And that is when the push for fundamental change in education started, right?
So it's kind of a blessing in disguise as far as people getting to see it. You know, I think
yes,
the kids paid for it because, you know, when I was in school, if I was in high school or if I was especially elementary school age, yeah, I'm gonna find some way to get around all that, you know, at home, you know, doing it on the laptop, you know, going to school, not having to go to school, you know, and all that. I just think that was way done overboard, and I think, but it kind of backfired on them. And parents did find out. Some parents found out what was going on.
That was the blessing that I had because I didn't actually have to do that with my school. None of the COVID nonsense. They were doing the mask and everything. They weren't even doing any of that. They were being taught like normal kids.
Well, public school has cut their own foot off, kind of. I mean, through the years, everybody runs from these schools and goes to private schools, does homeschooling, and the public schools and school boards can only blame themselves for this happening. I feel like. Because
I can tell you this is knowing everything I know about education. And if I were younger and mom was younger and we had our boys, if there was a way that we could pull off homeschooling, I would do that.
Mm-hmm.
I would do that.
Same here. But
I think, and we've seen a surge in homeschooling. And listen, homeschoolers grade out better than public school students. Private school students grade out better than public school students. That's just a fact, and that should tell us something.
But another thing is private school and homeschool kids actually act a lot more mature because they're not being raised by their peers. They're being raised by adults.
Well, I don't totally agree with that because the only thing I'm going to say about homeschooling is this, and neither one of you may not agree with me, but to me, part of going to school from the time you're in kindergarten to you graduate, and I don't know how you fix this, but part of it is learning to deal with other people. I don't mean your parent. I mean other peers, other kids, because it. I mean,
My only issue with that is the things they're dealing with nowadays is kids peeing in litter boxes. So,
well, yeah,
and they have to deal with that.
No, I understand that. I'm not saying that what I'm saying is totally the answer, but I'm just saying that I think there are kids that are homeschooled that get done that are a bit naive sometimes.
I think
Oh, I agree with that. Yes.
I get what you're talking about, Keith, and it goes, and you're talking about social interaction and stuff, right? And so, but the way homeschools are set up now, if you stop and think, okay, you know, there's a couple ways to look at it, okay? And you say, well, lack of social interaction. Well, with today's society, with everything we have from cell phones to computers and everything, that lack of social interaction is not as much. You can still socially interact. When kids get out of school in the afternoon, they all hang out in the neighborhood, or in the weekends they hang out in the neighborhood. So you still have that. With the change of the laws, you used to when you homeschool, you couldn't participate in any extracurricular activities at public school. That's changed. If you homeschool now, if you want to be in a high school band, you can be in band. If you want to be in the drama department, you can be part of drama, football, basketball.
Part of the LEARNS Act, or is that already that way?
And I know it's recently passed in the LEARNS Act.
I think it's recently done that way.
And but the laws were enacted. They were before the LEARNS Act. They had already gone to that, but now they're more enhanced into the LEARNS Act that way. So you can have those interactions. If you want to run track, if you're a homeschooler but you want to run track, you can run track at the school and be part of the track team. Tim Tebow was homeschooled all the way through high school, and he played public high school football.
Well, I'm not. I don't mean I'm against. I just have. I really have never been involved with it, but I just have had some reservation. I've thought about things like that, and I do hate to see the public school system completely die, but they're killing themselves. So it's kind of hard to control.
Kind of to your point, though, Keith, there are drawbacks to everything. So there's drawbacks to homeschool. Okay, no question about it. Okay, and part of that is that all-day social interaction that kind of may train you to when you get in the job world.
Yeah, you've got that high school, and all of a sudden, the world's looking at you.
Right, and so you
might know how to handle that.
So if you don't have that all-day social interaction with people, so then when you get in the job force and you go to work somewhere, okay, that I can see where people say that's a drawback, but eventually people adapt, and they do that. Okay,
I think you're right.
The thing is, you have to weigh things. So if I'm going, while my child may suffer, or I don't want to say suffer, but my child may not get as much social interaction by homeschooling, and how does that affect my child versus, but if I send my child to public school, they're going to graduate on an 8th grade reading level instead of a 12th grade reading level.
No, I agree. I agree. Yeah. No,
but it's how are you going to, so you're weighing things, right?
I just meant, I think that there are things to be learned about being bullied, things like, and I'm not saying these things are good, but they're facts. It's the way the world is, and I think all kids are different, and it depends on how the parents are going about doing their. I'll be honest. I've seen a couple, and this is probably not the majority at all, but I've seen a couple of kids that are supposed to be homeschooled, and they're like high school age, and I don't think it's happening. Just by the way they run their life, Now that's the parents' fault. But I mean that's a shame. But I think that's some isolated stuff. I think most people that homeschool their kids really care about getting their kids a better education, which is important. I guess I'm just old fashioned, and I have a little hard time letting go of the way things used to be. I guess But things aren't the way that's the problem. But I think this has been created by neglecting proper public school education.
I think, and I said at the beginning of the show, I'm saying again, the worst thing that happened to education in this country was Jimmy Carter creating the Federal Department of Education.
Yeah, right.
And there's a reason Trump wants to do away with it, and I wish they'd do away with it tomorrow.
That's a big fight, though.
All education should be. I don't even like the state having so much control in education.
Yeah, right.
Education, what we all believe in as conservatives, more local control, right?
Absolutely.
And I don't think enough attention's paid to those school board elections. I don't think people realize how important they are to pick the right people for these positions.
To me, in any local election, you talk about local elections, we talk about mayors, city council members, county judges, Keith, a quorum court justice of peace, you're a justice of peace, a quorum court member, the clerks, the sheriff. To me, the most important election in any local election is the school board election, yes, because that's where the future is. That's where the children are. And to me, that's the most important election. But I can say this.
They can stop these bad curriculums. They have the power to do that.
Well, they do because they establish curriculum. Right. That is part of their powers and duties under the law.
They don't.
And but I'll do this, and I'm going to see if you guys agree with me on this. Okay, I'm in Conway, right? I could go stand outside of Walmart in Conway, and 50 people. I could ask 50 people that walk in. I could say, "Hey, can you tell me the name of the Conway mayor?" And I bet half of them can't. If I said, "Hey, can you tell me who's on the city council?" and I bet you more than half of them couldn't. And if I asked 50 people that walked in Walmart who their school board rep is in their zone, I will bet you only 10 out of that 50 could tell me who their school board rep is.
Maybe that.
And
but they probably know that less than anything. You know.
Do you guys see that?
When I was talking to people, they'd say, it was not uncommon for them to say either, "What's the justice of the peace do?" or "I don't even know who my justice of peace is."
Yeah.
Or things like that. I would say, I hate to say, 60 to 70%.
Most people just want to live their lives. It's out of sight, out of mind.
But that's what's wrong with our country right there.
Yeah, there's not enough engagement. And I go back to this all the time. I said, look, and this is by design, okay? I used to use Dancing with the Stars as an example.
Yeah.
There are more people engaged with Dancing in the Stars and don't have a clue what's going on in their government. But they're focused on Dancing with the Stars. So now we graduated from Dancing to Stars. Now it's a TikTok nation. I call this a TikTok nation. People are more focused on TikTok videos and reels than they are what's going on in government in their country and what's going on in local government, what's going on in state government, what's going on in the federal government. They're more focused on TikTok videos and reels and things like that they have no clue. Okay. And that's how you lose freedom.
And they never do, and they don't until it's in their, look them in the face, or it's something that affects them directly, like when they raise taxes or when they are going to take some of your money or something, that's when all of a sudden you're going, whoa, what happened? What the hell?
Yeah.
They don't know the background of it because they haven't been following it. So they don't know why. So it just pisses them off. And they don't understand it. So it just makes them mad,
I'll use Kim Hammer as an example. Okay. State Senator Kim Hammer, that's your senator, right, Keith and Kevin? Is that you?
Yeah, He's my senator.
Okay.
No, Alan Clark is my senator.
He's okay.
And so Kim Hammer orchestrated taking away our freedoms. Mm-hmm. In Article 5, Section 1 of the state constitution when it comes to citizen-initiated amendments and acts. Okay. Now, as much as I've written about it, as much as you've talked about it, as much as it's been on the news, most of the people in the state have no clue that happened. Have no clue that happened. Most of the people in Ken Hammer's district don't have a clue that happened.
He's popular.
Right? And so they don't even, people don't even know that they lost freedom this legislative session because we're TikTok nation. We're too absorbed in everything else to pay attention. So all Kim Hammer has
directly at the time it doesn't affect him, directly,
Yeah.
It's
so all Kim Hammer does is, and like most of them do when it comes to election time, they put out, hey, I'm a conservative. I'm a Republican conservative. I'm a strong conservative. Vote for me. And that's all people see. So they go check that box. When in fact, they're not conservatives.
And then when the people do want to ask questions, the people like us that do get out there and start speaking against it, do start going to the legislative meetings and all that, and talking, they're going, whoa, wait a minute. We want you to be like these folks that don't really give a shit and just vote Republican. Yeah. That's what we want you to do.
And voting Republican is not really voting.
No,
people that run with the R by their name.
He's a Republican. He's a Republican, though. That's what you hear.
Yeah, well, like I say, they campaign. Kim Hammer does it. I'm a conservative. I wrote an article that went out today. I gave my top cottonmouth in the House award today for the 2025 session went to Kendon Underwood.
And they'll throw you enough conservative bones to fool you. I mean, but not fool you, but they'll throw enough conservative bones to say, well, I did this.
Crumbs. They'll throw you a few crumbs. Right?
Like this act. That's a good example. Like Act 249, which I think was SB 572 when it was a bill, if I'm not mistaken. And you were saying these two, the senator and representative, were not that great on conservatism, but they hit this one right.
Yeah, it's a crumb.
They throw one out there and say, well, forget all that bad stuff I did, but look what I did here.
That's right. And I'm going to say it, Opportunity Arkansas and Conduit News, they're throwing praises out left and right to people, but they're not calling them out for what they did do. So what we do at Arkansas First News is I'll give McAlinden credit and Dotson credit for this bill. Okay? I'll give them credit for it.
Credit.
Yeah. But I'm not going to thank them and go, oh, look at this. They're great. When in reality, they're both failures at conservatism. Okay? They got this one right. Great. I'm happy they did. But that doesn't absolve their failure at conservatism. I finished the article by saying, Keith, you probably know this old saying. When I grew up on the farm, we had an old saying, a blind hog found an acorn every now and then.
That's right. That's exactly what I was thinking at the beginning when you were talking about that.
Okay. And so I finished the article with that. Okay. So I'm not going to sit here and pat McAlinden and Dotson on the back and tell you how great they are, because they're not. They're terrible. They got this bill right. That's what I say about these folks. Yeah, there's a couple. Mary Bentley, State Representative Mary Bentley. She's a terrible conservative. She's not conservative at all. But what they'll do, and Kim Hammer does it now, so like in the 2023 session, Mary Bentley ran that bathroom bill, right? That bathroom bill for schools. That if you're a male, you're going to male bathroom. If you're a female, you're going to. Your birth certificate says male, you're going here, female here. If you can't figure out what you are, then we'll provide you a single bathroom facility.
Figure it out.
All right. And so that kind of deal. Well, she held that up. That's a conservative bill. Okay. And so she held it up in this hand and said, look what I'm doing. Look at this bathroom bill. I'm a conservative. And everybody went, oh my God, Mary Bentley is the best conservative in the world. Look what she did. But over here, that's one bill. Over here, the legislation she was running to take freedoms away from her. Running to voting for higher spending, voting to gut the Freedom of Information Act. But she wants to hold this up. So while you're looking at this one, over here, you're getting screwed.
And the bad thing is, you don't know really. I can't tell you how she felt about those bad bills she did. She might not. The thing that worries me is that she might not have been for them. She just is trying to scratch somebody's back. That's where it gets really nasty. Is when you are voting against something that's against your principles. Like I've told one of them one time, and I said, you know what? There is a protest vote. You don't have to vote along. Just, I mean, if you don't believe in that, don't damn vote for it. And if
Well,
it's not gonna, you're not gonna help anything. At least you're telling people how you feel.
what the legislature does, and they ingrain this, and over time, the ones that have been there a long time, it's so ingrained in them. And then when they get new ones in, when you see these freshmen and sophomore state reps and senators come in, they immediately start indoctrinating them. You're part of the club now. Let me tell you how we do things here.
Yeah.
That type of thing. So what you
Smith
see
goes
is
to Washington type thing. Mr. Smith goes to Washington.
yes. And so what you see is you see freshman legislators go in with this mindset, look, I'm here for the people and I'm not going to do the, and they campaigned on that. And when they get in there before they know it, they're actually following the lead of these people.
Well, they got to be strong. Yeah. Because they mean well. A lot of them mean well when they go. I think
when they go. But then the next thing you know, they're listening to the establishment instead of the people.
Right. Threats, whatever else.
And they know it's wrong. Listen, when Joel Underwood, when Kendon Underwood, State Representative Kendon Underwood from Cave Springs, when he primary sponsored those bills with Hammer so that he could push them in the House, he knew damn well that was wrong. He knew damn well he was taking freedoms from people. He knew it, but he still made the choice to go ahead and do it.
That's the bad thing about rhinos, purple folks, is that I don't like liberal thinking. I don't like Democrat thinking of today's Democrat thinking, but at least normally they'll probably hold to their values more than so-called conservatives.
They'll stand their ground.
That's what I mean. They will, and that's one thing. It's hurt conservative or Republicans. I think conservatives hold the ground, but there's not enough of them. But your normal conservatives don't want to rock the boat.
Well, not just that. There ain't no money in having morals.
True.
True statement. But here's the reality at the state capitol, and you guys have seen me write it. You've heard me say it. Okay. The conservatives are the minority at the state capitol and the legislature. That's a fact. Here's what you got. You got the swamp party, okay, that portray themselves as Republicans and conservatives, but they're not. They're the swamp party. And then you have the Democrats. And then you have the conservatives. There are more Democrats in the state legislature than there are conservatives. That's a fact.
There's more swamp party Republicans than there are Democrats.
That's right.
And swamp folks, real conservatives together.
That's right. That is absolutely right. Because it doesn't make sense. Kevin, would you agree with me that in this state, the makeup of the residents and citizens in the states is overwhelmingly conservative?
Yes.
Would you agree with that?
Everywhere I go, it's more conservative.
So isn't it crazy that while the citizens of the states are overwhelmingly conservative, the legislative body is overwhelmingly anti-conservative?
Well, that's why we're doing what we're doing here, is to try to wake people up that this is going on and that they need to get involved. It's not so simple as just going and voting for a Republican. And that's a lot of people. I don't know how many people will go to that voting booth and they'll go, well, just show me where the Republican is. I've worked polls before. Show me where the Republican is. I won't vote Republican. But they're not putting any more thought in it than that.
There's not really anyone else running against them. That's the other part is even when we have someone running against them, that's hard for them to do it because one, it costs too much dang money.
True.
And then they got so much things going against them.
Well, that's because they're scared of us real conservatives because real conservatives, especially since Trump's been elected, are surging, and it scares the hell out of them.
It does, and you're right, Kevin. To primary an incumbent is extremely hard. The RPA, the Republican Party of Arkansas, the machine, the establishment makes it next to impossible for somebody to primary and truly have a fair shot at challenging that incumbent. But what happens is the RPA, They promote it. So when these people would, like us, use Kim Hammer's example, he'll campaign on that he's a conservative when he's not. All of them campaign that they're Republican conservatives when they're not. Well, you can say you're something all day long. It does not mean that is the case. And that's why it's incumbent, like you guys do a great job of trying to get the message out to, and it is making a difference. More and more people are seeing it every day. You guys do a phenomenal job of trying to get the truth and the facts out to the people.
Well, the whole Arkansas First News is doing great articles and everything.
Well, yeah, I think we're all working in unison, working hard, and we are making a difference. We're starting to make a difference, but it's so simple. Look, I can go I can go run on something. I can say I'm this. Okay, I can put I'm Catholic. Okay, I'm Catholic, but I can put up a sign that says, "Hey, I'm Jimmie Cavin, and I'm a Methodist." Well, I'm not, but I just told you I am, and I put a little sign up that says I'm a Methodist, so surely that's true, right? Well, no, hell no, it's not true. And right, so I mean, so it's no different than what Kim Hammer and these people are doing, or Kendon Underwood, or Hester, or any of them. They put up a sign that says, "I'm a conservative, I'm a Republican." Well, no, you're not. But to the people, so if I walk up to you at Walmart and you don't know me and I introduce myself, "Hi, I'm Jimmie Cavin. I'm a Methodist." Okay. Well, you're not going to go, "Nah, ain't no way this guy's a Methodist." Well, you're going to take it to what I just said, right? But when we vote, we take instead of digging in, we just take it. So it's incumbent upon conservatives across the state to not just look at a campaign sign.
Well,
to not just look at it.
I remember back, it still happens probably, but I remember the time when, guys are going to go run for office for the first time. First thing he thinks to himself, I got to find me a church to go to. I got to get in the church. I got to get in the church. I got to have a church I'm going to. You've seen that happen.
Right. And well, I'll give you an example. Opportunity, Arkansas. Okay. They just ran a deal praising, oh God, I'm trying to remember who was on the grocery tax, right? And
talking about not taxing groceries,
right? And talking about Kendon Underwood, okay? That he ran the bill in the House with Hester, but he ran the bill to do away with the grocery tax,
right? And
they were just applauding him left and right. I'm going, okay, well, let's stop and think about that. Okay, the state grocery tax was 0.125%. 0.125%. That's on the dollar, that's 1/10 of a penny. Okay, and so for if you spend $10, because they got that grocery tax repealed, which is 1/10 of a penny on the dollar. So for every $10 you spend at Walmart, you just saved 1 1/4 penny. 1 1/4 penny. Why the hell should I get all excited about that?
Yeah.
But Opportunity Arkansas is just proud thing. He did our grocery tax is gone. Well, okay, I guess I'm okay with that. But what did you save me a year? What did you save me a year? $1? $1.50?
Sounds better than it is.
Yes, but they promote it like it's such a big deal. But at the same time, Opportunity Arkansas is praising this guy for it. But at the same time, Kendon Underwood is the guy that voted a special interest to put out-of-state insurance companies over Arkansans to put profits in their pocket, taking money out of Arkansans' pockets. But they won't talk about that. That's the reason I get, Opportunity Arkansas, they're just there to carry water for the governor and the Republican Party. They won't talk about that. Conduit went on this big deal praising Underwood for a transparency bill. Okay, well, you've always had to find, Keith, you know this. Okay, you're a JP. JPs, school board members, local communities, they've always had to file what's called a statement of financial interest with the county clerk. It's not just state offices, it's local people that run, okay? Well, they expanded that. Somebody made this little change to it and expanded somewhat. And now the Secretary of State, well, on a different bill, which I believe was one of R.J. Hawk's bills, that now the Secretary of State, you file with them and they keep the records. Okay, that's a good bill. What Underwood did by making this slight little change, okay, it added a little bit of transparency. It wasn't that big a deal. Well, Condu in Arkansas I said, oh boy, thank you for adding transparency. Well, it was already there. They said now local officials, candidates have to file a financial disclosure. Well, hell, you already had to.
Yeah, right.
This just amended it slightly, and they're praising him. But Conduit News, they won't say a damn thing about him taking away your freedoms in Article 5 or Section 1. And so stuff like that, I'm sitting there going, if you think that those organizations are going to tell you the truth, they're not. Conduit News is doing a terrible something.
And we're going to have to go. They're just thriving on, they're hoping, so many people are just going to read the title and they're not really going to put a lot of thought into it. And
That's
I
right.
hate that about American people, but we're that way. We're spoiled. I mean, I've been overseas. Kevin has. Normally, people in other countries know a bit more about their government than we do. The common citizen, and it's because we're a spoiled civilization right now. I mean, we're spoiled. We have it so good that we just don't take a lot for granted.
You said something so important, Keith, that I've harped on for the last few years. We are a headline society. We're a headline. It's whatever the headline says is what the takeaway is.
Mm-hmm.
And instead of hearing further, right? And so that's why I try hard when I write an article. I think hard about my headline, and then I think about my lead in the first couple of paragraphs or what I put in a post, because that's what people. So I want to get that message in that, because people don't take the time to read everything, and so you got to get your message
really
across.
Make the title interesting to where they want to read on, and not just
That's right.
Not just read the title and go, oh, I know what that's about. That's about.
Kevin, would you agree that we're a headline nation, that people focus more on headlines instead of getting in depth?
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with that. I can't tell you how many people I've actually ran into that all they do is the top line. I'm like, yeah, that's only a half truth. If you actually read down just a little bit lower, that's where they actually hide the tidbit, where they actually go against what the title says.
That's where NBC, ABC, MSNBC, CNN, Fox, that's where they all run is counting on people just not knowing anything else than what they're telling.
Yeah, without doing it now.
We're Fox too. All of them are that.
Oh, I agree, and I think what you guys do a good job of, and what we're all on the Arkansas First Team, and what we try to do is effectively give you the truth and the facts, no matter what they are.
Yeah, there's a lot of good news agencies out there. We're doing a good one. I think we got the best one here in Arkansas, and there's a lot of good national ones. And people are starting to really turn away from these common news channels. They really, it's happening rapidly.
Yes, a lot of people actually going to private, and they're going to alternate media now. They're all going to people like Timcast and all these other podcasts. They're going away from mainstream media and into podcasts.
Yeah, Real Americans
are actually talking about
like that. Newsmax, places like that are giving you a little bit more brave. What is it, Blades and people like that.
I believe that we have a responsibility. Kevin's got a responsibility. Keith, you got a responsibility. I got a responsibility. That if we're going to do this, that our responsibility is to make sure that what we're saying is truthful, factual, to the best of our knowledge. Present the documents, present the things to back up what we're saying. Now, we can, obviously, I'm going to give you my opinion on the facts.
Sure.
Okay. I'm going to give you that, but I'm going to give you the facts. And so what I work hard to do, if I'm putting together what's an investigative report or whatever I'm doing, if I say it, I can back it up. Mm-hmm. And that's why I think that's what people are looking for. There are people that will read me that hate me. Okay. But they still read me. But it's like I say, look, you may not like what I'm telling you.
They love to hate you.
Do what?
They love to hate you.
Oh, yeah. But I look at him and say, you may not like what I'm telling you, but can you dispute it? And that's the key, right? Can you dispute it? And I can't.
Look at Trump. He's on. They can't get enough of him. He's on the news more. He's been on the news more than he has open cabinet meetings. He's always having press conferences almost every day, and they hate him, but they love it.
Well, it's ratings, man. It's ratings. It's a free advertisement.
They hate him, but what they love is that he doesn't hide. He's transparent.
Not at all. He's the most transparent to me president I've ever seen in my lifetime.
Yes, and but yeah, I think people are turning to some of. I know you're going to give me the hook because I've talked forever, right? And I do think people in our state are starting to look around and see that, wait a minute, these people that told us they were conservative and these people that told us that they were going to do it this way, they've been lying to us.
My last thing to say is that the press has done it to themselves by lying going so far overboard, more than they used to, that they've really made their own bed.
Yeah, I agree.
We're gonna have to end this here, and it's been great. Another great Jimmie Cavin show. Appreciate you coming on with us, and
hey, I want to tell you this. I love your show. I love what you guys do. I'll be a guest anytime you want me. I think you guys do a hell of a job and a great show.
I appreciate it, and y'all tune in to Arkansas First News website, and we're on Facebook. And you'll see our podcast, and Candy Cox has a podcast on there, and Jimmy has a drove of articles you can read, and everybody else. So thank y'all.
Good night, everybody.